The heat wave slammed Chicago like a sledgehammer. Through the warped plastic of his makeshift shelter, 48-year-old Victor Russo watched a massive dirt bike smash into the trash pile 20 feet away. The rider lay motionless, his leather vest shredded, blood pooling beneath his head. Outside, the temperature was climbing to 110 in the shade. Without help, the stranger would die within the hour. Victor's stomach cramped from 3 days without food. His fever spiked higher with each ragged breath. He had an impossible choice. Stay cool and let a stranger roast to death, or risk everything he had left to save someone he'd never met. What Victor didn't know was that the man dying in the sun wasn't just any biker, and his next decision would change not just one life, but transform his entire world forever. But before that life-changing moment, Victor Russo was fighting a battle he seemed destined to lose. 3 days earlier, Victor Russo woke up to the sound of his own coughing. Blood specks dotted the threadbare towel he'd pulled over his mouth. His makeshift shelter, built from salvaged plywood and corrugated metal, offered little protection from Chicago's brutal July heat. But Victor had survived worse. 3 tours in Afghanistan, IEDs that killed his best friends, firefights that lasted 18 hours. He could handle a little heat. The Silver Star medal sat in its wooden box beside his pillow. Victor picked it up, feeling its weight. The ribbon had faded from deep red to pink, but the Silver Star still caught what little light filtered through the plastic sheeting he'd used as windows. This medal was earned in blood. Helmand Province, 2010. A roadside bomb flipped their MRAP. Victor crawled through flames to pull out Corporal Hayes and Private Morrison. Both men lived because Victor refused to leave anyone behind. Now, 13 years later, those same hands struggled to open a can of beans. Victor's morning routine never changed. Fold the towel with military precision. Arrange his few possessions in perfect order. Change into his cleanest shirt. Search for work. Today's destination, Sullivan Construction Company. The receptionist barely looked up when Victor entered. Her eyes swept over his worn jacket and weathered boots with practiced indifference. "I'm here about the construction foreman position," Victor said, standing straighter. "Do you have experience?" 3 years managing logistics for forward operating bases. Built everything from bunkers to, "We'll call you if anything opens up." The door closed behind him with a soft click. 24th rejection in 2 months. Victor walked through downtown Chicago, past office buildings where he'd once dreamed of working security, past restaurants where the smell of food made his empty stomach clench, past people who looked through him like he was invisible. At 48, Victor felt like a ghost haunting his own life. The Veterans Affairs office was his next stop. The same social worker, Mrs. Carter, greeted him with tired sympathy. "Housing list hasn't moved, Victor. Still 47 people ahead of you. What about the job placement program?" "Budget cuts. It's suspended indefinitely." Victor nodded. He'd expected this answer, but hope was a stubborn thing. Walking back to his shelter, Victor passed Murphy's pawn shop. The neon sign buzzed in the window. "We buy gold, silver, metals." He'd walked past this store hundreds of times, never once considered going inside until today. Victor stopped, staring at his reflection in the grimy window. When had he gotten so thin? When had his eyes developed those dark circles? 3 days without food would do that to a man. Back at his shelter, Victor counted his money. $467. Not enough for food. Enough. Definitely not enough for the antibiotics he needed for the infection spreading through his chest. The coughing fits were getting worse. Sometimes he tasted copper. Sometimes he couldn't catch his breath for minutes at a time. Victor opened the wooden box and lifted out his Silver Star. "You boys understand, don't you?" He whispered to the memory of Hayes and Morrison. "Sometimes you sacrifice everything to save someone else." but he couldn't bring himself to walk back to the pawn shop. Not yet. Instead, Victor climbed into his towel and closed his eyes. Maybe tomorrow will be different. Maybe someone would give him a chance. Maybe the infection would clear up on its own. Outside, the heat picked up. Weather reports had been warning about a massive heat wave heading toward Chicago, the kind of storm that kills homeless people every year. Victor had weathered heat before. He'd built this shelter with the same precision he'd used constructing military outposts. Every joint was reinforced. Every gap was sealed. He could survive whatever nature threw at him. As darkness fell, Victor's fever spiked. He pulled the thin towel tighter and tried to ignore the hunger gnawing at his stomach, tried to ignore the burning in his chest, tried to ignore the fear that maybe this time survival wasn't guaranteed. The wooden box sat beside him, the silver star inside catching moonlight through the plastic window. His most precious possession, his last connection to the man he used to be. By morning, the temperature had climbed 20 degrees. Weather alerts screamed from every radio in the city. The heat wave of the decade was bearing down on Chicago, and Victor Russo was about to face a choice that would test everything he believed about sacrifice, honor, and what it meant to be human. What he didn't know was that within hours, a stranger would crash into his life. A stranger whose identity would shock him. A stranger who would change everything. But first, the heat had to arrive. The heat wave arrived like a desert apocalypse. Victor woke to the sound of his shelter groaning under blistering temperatures. Sun hammered against the metal walls like machine gun fire. Through the plastic window, he could see nothing but shimmering chaos. The weather reports hadn't lied. This was the heat wave of the century. His chest burned with every breath. The fever had climbed higher during the night, and the coughing fits now left him gasping for air. But Victor had survived worse conditions in Afghanistan. He could wait this out. Then he heard the crash. Metal against concrete, the screech of brakes, the sickening thud of something heavy hitting the ground. Victor peered through the plastic sheeting. Through the wavering heat, he could make out the dark shape of a dirt bike lying on its side. Steam rose from the engine. But where was the rider? He grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the heat. The sun hit him like a physical blow. Heat knocked him sideways, and asphalt stung his face like thousands of tiny needles. Each breath felt like swallowing razors. 20 EFT from his shelter, Victor found him. A massive man lay crumpled in the sun, his leather vest torn open across the back. Blood seeped from a gash on his forehead, already drying in the triple-digit temperature. The stranger's face was flushed, his lips cracked and bleeding. Heat stroke. Victor had seen it in the deserts of Afghanistan. Without immediate help, this man would be dead within the hour. Victor knelt beside the stranger, checking for a pulse, weak but steady. The man's breathing was shallow, his skin burning to the touch. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. The stranger was unconscious, maybe concussed from the crash. Victor looked back at his shelter, then at the dying man in the sun. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to walk away. He was sick, starving, barely surviving himself. He couldn't take care of another person. But he'd taken an oath 13 years ago. Leave no one behind. Victor grabbed the stranger under the arms and started dragging him toward the shelter. The man was enormous, at least 6'4", and 250 lb of solid muscle. Victor's weakened body screamed in protest with every step. Halfway to the shelter, Victor collapsed. His vision blurred. The coughing fit that seized him brought up more blood than before. The stranger was going to die. Victor was going to die. 2 men would be found baked in this lot when the heat passed. Then Victor thought about Hayes and Morrison, about the promise he'd made to never leave a brother behind. He stood up. Step by agonizing step, Victor dragged the unconscious stranger to his shelter. By the time they reached the door, Victor's fever had spiked so high he could barely think straight. Inside, Victor laid the stranger on his only towel. The man's leather vest was soaked through. His jeans were stiff with sweat. Without shade and fluids, heat stroke would claim him within minutes. Victor had one dry shirt, one pair of pants, one towel. He stripped the stranger out of his soaked clothes and wrapped him in everything Victor owned. Then Victor sat shivering in his underwear, watching the stranger's breathing slowly stabilize. The gash on the man's forehead needed attention. Victor had basic first aid training from the military, but he had no supplies, no antiseptic, no bandages, no antibiotics. Victor looked at the wooden box containing his silver star. Inside that box was his last hope, the only thing valuable enough to trade for medicine. The stranger mumbled something in his unconsciousness. Victor leaned closer. "Sarah. Tell Sarah I'm sorry." Whoever this man was, he had people who loved him, people who would grieve if he died in a stranger's shelter. Victor made his decision. He pulled on his damp jacket and stepped back into the heat wave. Murphy's pawn shop was 6 blocks away. In this heat, it might as well be 60 sweatstorms, but Victor had walked through worse. In Helmand, he'd carried wounded soldiers across open ground under enemy fire. He could make it 6 blocks. The sun tried to knock him down with every step. Heat cut through his thin jacket like fire knives. His fever made everything feel like a fever dream. But Victor kept walking. Behind him, in a shelter built from scraps and determination, a stranger lay unconscious. A stranger whose identity would soon shock Victor to his core. A stranger who commanded the loyalty of 50 of the most dangerous men in Chicago. But Victor didn't know any of that. All he knew was that someone needed help, and he was the only one who could provide it, even if it cost him everything. The pawnshop's neon sign glowed through the heat like a beacon. Victor pushed through the door, his silver star clutched in his burning fingers. What happened next would change both their lives forever. The pawnshop bell jingled as Victor stumbled through the door, sweat melting off his jacket onto the worn carpet. Behind the bulletproof glass, Tom Murphy looked up from his newspaper. His eyes narrowed as he took in Victor's appearance. Fever-bright eyes, trembling hands, desperate urgency written across his face. "We're closed," Murphy said, not looking up. "Please." Victor's voice came out as a rasp. "I need to sell something." Murphy sighed and buzzed him through the security door. "Make it quick. The heat's getting worse." Victor placed the wooden box on the counter with shaking hands. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay his silver star medal. The silver caught the fluorescent light, its ribbon still bearing the deep red color that had once made him proud. Murphy picked up the medal, examining it with professional detachment. "Afghanistan, 3 tours," Victor's voice cracked. "Earned it by pulling 2 Marines from a burning vehicle. Helmand Province, 2010. $50. The number hit Victor like a physical blow. $50 for 3 years of his life. $50 for watching friends die. $50 for the nightmares that still woke him screaming. That's all," Murphy shrugged. "Markets flooded with these things. Veterans selling them for drug money. Sorry, pal." Victor thought about the stranger dying in his shelter. About Hayes's wife, who would never see her husband again because Victor had carried him to safety. About Morrison, who was now raising 3 kids because Victor had refused to leave him behind. Deal. The cash felt like betrayal in his hands. Victor grabbed a bottle of antiseptic, gauze, antibiotics, and pain medication from the convenience section. The total came to $47. He had $3 left to his name. The walk back through the heat wave nearly killed him. Sun knocked him down twice, and Victor lay on the asphalt for precious seconds, wondering if it would be easier to just stay down. His fever spiked so high he started hallucinating, seeing Hayes and Morrison walking beside him through the heat. "You did the right thing," Hayes whispered through the sweltering air. "You always do the right thing." But Victor wasn't sure anymore. He'd just sold his soul for a stranger. 3 blocks from his shelter, Victor collapsed against an abandoned building. His chest burned with every breath. Blood from his coughing fits dried instantly on his lips. For a moment, he considered giving up. Then he thought about the unconscious man waiting in his shelter. Another soldier from the way he carried himself. Another brother in arms who needed help. Victor forced himself to stand. Back at the shelter, the stranger was still unconscious, but breathing steadier. Victor's towel had cooled him enough to prevent immediate death from heat stroke, but his color was still dangerously flushed. Victor knelt beside him and began the delicate work of saving a life. First, the head wound. Victor cleaned away dried blood with gentle precision, the same care he'd used treating wounded Marines in field hospitals. The gash was deep, but not life-threatening if properly cleaned. The antiseptic stung Victor's cracked hands as he worked, but he methodically cleaned every inch of the wound. "Apply antibiotic ointment. Bandage with military precision. Check for signs of concussion." The stranger was massive up close, easily 6'4", and 250 lbs of solid muscle. His hands were scarred and calloused, telling stories of hard work and harder fights. A faded tattoo on his forearm showed an eagle clutching a rifle surrounded by symbols Victor didn't recognize. Something about this man commanded respect, even unconsciously. As Victor worked, he noticed other details. The stranger's leather vest was expensive, custom-made. His boots were steel-toed, built for work and combat. A heavy silver ring on his right hand bore intricate engravings. This wasn't just any biker. This was someone important. Victor gave the stranger 2 of the antibiotic pills, crushing them and mixing them with water to help with absorption. He administered a painkiller for the head injury. Then he sat back and waited. Without his towel, the shelter felt like a walk-in oven. Victor huddled in the corner, his thin jacket offering no protection against the triple-digit temperatures seeping through every crack. His fever raged higher, but now he had nothing left to trade for medicine. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his last resources saving someone else, and now he might die from his own illness. The stranger mumbled in his unconsciousness. "Sarah, I'm sorry, Sarah. Tell the boys I tried." Victor leaned closer, adjusting the towel around the man's shoulders. "Hey, can you hear me? You're safe now?" The man's eyes fluttered open. Deep brown, alert despite the head injury. Intelligence burned behind those eyes, along with something else. Authority. This was a man accustomed to being in charge. He tried to sit up, winced from the head wound, and fell back against the makeshift pillow Victor had fashioned from his spare shirt. Where am I?" "My place." Victor gestured around the ramshackle shelter. "You crashed your bike in the heat. Hit your head pretty bad." The stranger's eyes swept the shelter, taking in every detail. The walls held together with duct tape and determination. The floor was covered with salvaged carpet, the single plastic window letting in filtered light. The military precision in how everything was organized despite the poverty. Then he looked at Victor sweating in the corner, clearly sick, clearly poor, but alert and protective. "And you brought me here?" Victor nodded, then regretted it as the motion made his head spin. "Why?" The stranger's voice was gravelly, commanding even in weakness. "You don't know me from Adam." It didn't matter. Victor's teeth chattered uncontrollably. "Couldn't leave you to die out there." The stranger studied Victor's face, seeing something there that made his expression shift from suspicion to respect. "You're military." "Was. Marines, a long time ago, I can tell. Same way you carry yourself." The stranger extended his hand with obvious effort. "Michael Sullivan. My friends call me Steele." Victor shook the offered hand, surprised by its strength despite the man's injuries. "Victor Russo." Steele's eyes swept over the shelter again, noting more details. Now the empty silver star ribbon pinned to the wall, the careful arrangement of meager possessions. The first aid supplies were still scattered nearby. "Is that a silver star ribbon?" Victor followed his gaze to the empty ribbon, his face flushing with shame. "Was. I had to sell the medal. Needed money for your medicine." Steele stared at him in complete disbelief. "You sold your silver star for me? A complete stranger." Victor's coughing fit prevented him from answering immediately. When he finally caught his breath, blood flecked his lips, and the taste of copper filled his mouth. "You were dying," Victor said simply, wiping blood from his mouth. "That's what we do, right? We don't leave people behind. Ever." Something profound shifted in Steele's expression. Recognition, understanding, the look one soldier gives another when they recognize true brotherhood. "Jesus Christ," Steele whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't even know who I am, do you?" "Doesn't matter who you are," Victor said, pulling his thin jacket tighter against the heat. "What matters is you're alive. That's all that matters." Steele tried to sit up again, moving slowly but with determination. "I need to call my people. They'll be looking for me." "Heat knocked out the cell towers," Victor explained. "No service until it passes. Probably tomorrow morning." Steele nodded grimly, then looked at Victor sweating violently in the corner. "That's your only towel? You need it more than I do. You're still heat-stroked." Steele started unwrapping himself from the towel, despite Victor's protests. "Share it. We'll both fry if we're stupid about this." Victor wanted to refuse. His military pride demanded it, but his fever was climbing to dangerous levels. His body shook uncontrollably, and he could feel consciousness starting to slip away. They huddled together under the single towel. Two soldiers from different countries, different backgrounds, different worlds, sharing shade and fighting to survive the day. "Afghanistan?" Steele asked quietly. 3 trips. You? 2 tours? 2 lost good men over there." "Same." Victor's voice was barely a whisper. "Hayes and Morrison. I was supposed to die instead of them." "Survivor's guilt's a bitch," Steele said softly, "but they lived because of you." "That matters." Outside, the heat raged with apocalyptic fury, threatening to tear apart everything in its path. Inside, 2 warriors who had seen the worst humanity could offer each other found something neither had experienced in years. Brotherhood. Neither of them knew that this moment, this simple act of sacrificial kindness, was about to explode into something that would change both their lives forever. But first, they had to survive the longest day of their lives. And in the morning, Steele would make a phone call that would bring 50 motorcycles roaring into Victor's world. Dawn broke gray and sweltering over Chicago, but the heat wave had finally passed. Victor woke to the sound of motorcycle engines rumbling in the distance, multiple bikes getting closer. His fever had broken sometime during the night, leaving him weak but clear-headed for the first time in days. Beside him, Steele was sitting up, checking his bandaged head wound in a cracked mirror Victor kept propped against the wall. "How do you feel?" Victor asked, his voice hoarse from coughing. "Like I got hit by a freight train." Steele winced as he touched the bandage. "But alive. Thanks to you." The motorcycle engines grew louder. Steele's expression changed, alert, focused like a commander hearing his troops approach. "That'll be my boys," he said, standing carefully. "They've been looking for me all night." Through the plastic window, Victor could see 3 massive Harley-Davidson motorcycles pulling into the lot. 3 men in leather vests dismounted, their faces etched with worry and relief as they spotted Steele moving around inside the shelter. "Steele!" The largest of the 3 called out. "You son of a... We thought you were dead." Steele stepped outside, Victor following hesitantly. The 3 bikers rushed over but stopped short when they saw the makeshift shelter and Victor's obviously poor condition. "Jesus, Steele, what happened?" asked a bearded man with arms like tree trunks. "We found your bike a quarter-mile from here. Figured you for a goner. Would have been if not for Victor here." Steele placed a hand on Victor's shoulder. "This man saved my life." The 3 bikers looked at Victor with new interest. He stood in the doorway of his ramshackle shelter wearing a threadbare jacket, obviously sick, obviously poor. But Steele spoke of him with respect that made them take notice. "Found me unconscious in the sun," Steele continued. "Brought me into his home, patched me up, kept me cool through the day. This man's a hero." The bearded biker stepped forward, extending his hand. "Name's Rock. Any friend of Steele's is family to us." Victor shook the offered hand, surprised by the genuine warmth in the gesture. "I didn't do anything special," Victor said quietly. "Just what anyone would do." "Bullshit," Steele said firmly. "You saved my life, and I don't forget debts like that." Steele reached into his vest and pulled out a thick roll of cash. "How much do you need? Rent, food, medical bills. Name your price." Victor stepped back like Steele had offered him a snake. "I don't want your money." "Come on, man. I know you need it. That shelter won't last another heat wave like yesterday." I said no. Victor's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd made hard decisions before. "I didn't help you for money." Steele stared at him in disbelief. "You sold your silver star for me, your most valuable possession. Let me pay you back." "Can't put a price on doing the right thing," Victor said simply. The 3 bikers exchanged glances. They'd never seen anyone turn down Steele's money before. Hell, they'd never seen anyone turn down free money, period. Steele studied Victor's face, seeing something there that made him nod slowly. "You're a proud man. I respect that. But pride doesn't keep you cool or fed." Steele reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small leather patch, black with silver threading, bearing symbols Victor didn't recognize. It looked official, important. "Take this then," Steele said, pressing the patch into Victor's hands. "Consider it a thank you gift. Might come in handy someday." Victor looked at the patch, feeling its weight. The leather was expensive, handcrafted. The silver threading spelled out words he couldn't quite make out in the morning light. "What is it?" "Just a little something to remember me by," Steele said with a slight smile. "Keep it safe." Rock appeared beside Steele's Harley with a toolbox. "Bike's got some damage, but nothing we can't fix right here. Give us 20 minutes. As the bikers worked on Steele's motorcycle, Victor helped where he could. His years in the Marines had taught him basic mechanics, and he found himself easily keeping pace with the repairs. "You know your way around an engine," Rock observed, watching Victor adjust a cable with practiced precision. "Worked on vehicles in Afghanistan. Keeps you alive when you can fix your own ride." Steele watched Victor work, noting the competence, the quiet professionalism. This wasn't just any homeless veteran. This was a leader, someone who commanded respect through action rather than words. 20 minutes later, Steele's Harley roared to life. The 4 bikers mounted their machines, but Steele hesitated before putting on his helmet. "Victor," he called out over the engine noise. "You ever need anything at all? You find a way to get the word to me, Michael Sullivan. People know how to reach me." Victor nodded, clutching the leather patch in his hand. "Take care of yourself, Steele." "You too, brother. You too." The 4 motorcycles roared away, leaving Victor standing alone in his lot. He looked down at the patch in his hands, wondering what it meant, why Steele had seemed so insistent he keep it. What Victor didn't know was that he now held a piece of leather that would change his life forever, a patch that marked him as under the protection of the most powerful motorcycle club in Chicago. But that revelation was still hours away. That afternoon, Victor walked to the Chicago Public Library, the leather patch burning in his pocket like a secret. The building's air conditioning enveloped him as he settled at a computer terminal. His fingers, still stiff from the heat, typed slowly into the search bar. Michael Sullivan Chicago motorcycle. The results made his blood run cold. The first hit was from the Chicago Tribune. Outlaw's president reported missing in heat wave. The photograph showed Steele unmistakably. Steele, but not the injured man Victor had nursed back to health. This was Steele in full regalia, surrounded by dozens of leather-clad bikers commanding absolute authority. Victor's hands shook as he clicked through more articles. Michael Steele Sullivan, 47, president of the Chicago chapter of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, was reported missing during yesterday's heat wave. Sullivan, a decorated Canadian military veteran, commands the loyalty of over 200 club members across the greater Chicago area. The Outlaws have mobilized search teams throughout the city, offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to Sullivan's safe return. Victor leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. He'd saved the president of the Outlaws, the most powerful, most feared motorcycle club in Chicago, a man who commanded hundreds of loyal followers. With trembling fingers, Victor pulled out the leather patch Steele had given him. Under the library's fluorescent lights, he could finally read the silver threading clearly. Outlaws MC arched across the top. Below that, Chicago, in bold letters, and at the bottom, the words that made Victor's heart stop. President. This wasn't just any patch. This was Steele's personal insignia, the mark of absolute authority within one of the most notorious organizations in America. Victor Googled Outlaws patch meaning and felt his world shift beneath him. According to every source he found, these patches were sacred. They were earned through years of loyalty, blood, and sacrifice. No one outside the club was ever given one, ever, except Steele had pressed this into his hands like it was nothing. Victor's ancient flip phone he kept for emergencies buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heat's over. Club's riding again. Hope you're staying cool. Steele. How had Steele gotten his number? Victor had never given it to him. More concerning, how many people knew where Victor lived? As if summoned by his thoughts, Victor noticed a figure through the library window. A lone motorcyclist sat across the street, engine idling, watching the library entrance. The rider's face was hidden behind a helmet, but something about his posture suggested he was waiting for Victor. Victor gathered his things and walked toward the exit, testing a theory. The motorcycle's engine revved slightly as he appeared in the doorway. Victor turned left down the sidewalk. In his peripheral vision, the motorcycle slowly pulled away from the curb, maintaining a careful distance. Someone was following him, someone who knew exactly who he was and where he'd been. The patch in his pocket felt heavier with each step. What exactly had Steele given him? And more importantly, what did it mean that Victor now carried the personal insignia of Chicago's most powerful crime boss? By tomorrow, Victor would have his answer, and it would change everything. The next morning, Victor woke to a sound that made his blood freeze. Thunder, but not from the sky. Dozens of motorcycle engines rumbling in perfect synchronization, growing louder by the second. Victor peered through his plastic window and felt his heart stop. 50 motorcycles rolled into his lot like an army of chrome and leather. Harleys of every size and color, their riders dressed in identical black vests bearing the distinctive Outlaws patches. They formed a perfect semicircle around Victor's shelter, engines idling in ominous unison. Victor stepped outside, his legs barely holding him upright. 50 pairs of eyes watched him from behind dark sunglasses. 50 men who looked like they could break him in half without breaking a sweat. At the center of the formation, Steele sat on his repaired Harley. But this wasn't the injured man Victor had saved. This was Michael Sullivan in his full authority, president of the most feared motorcycle club in America. Steele dismounted and walked toward Victor, his boots crunching on the cracked asphalt. The other bikers remained motionless, engines still rumbling like caged beasts. "Morning, Victor." "Steele." Victor's voice came out steadier than he felt. "Hell of a welcoming committee?" Steele smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "We need to talk." Steele gestured to the bikers behind him. "These are my brothers, my family. They've been riding with me for years, following my orders, trusting my judgment." Victor nodded, not sure where this was going. "Last night I told them a story," Steele continued, "about a man who found me dying in a heat wave, a man who gave up everything he had to save a complete stranger, a man who sold his most precious possession, his Silver Star medal, to buy medicine for someone he'd never met." The motorcycle engines fell silent. 50 men listened with the attention of soldiers receiving orders. "I told them about a Marine who refused my money, who wouldn't take a cent for saving my life, who helped fix my bike even though he was sick and starving." Steele's voice grew stronger, carrying across the lot like a battlefield commander addressing his troops. "I told them about real brotherhood, the kind we claim to have, but rarely see tested." Steele reached into his vest and pulled out a small wooden box. Victor's heart clenched as he recognized it. "Took me 3 hours to track down the pawn shop. It cost me $500 to buy this back." Steele opened the box, revealing Victor's Silver Star medal, polished to a shine brighter than the day it was awarded. "This belongs to you," Steele said, extending the box. "A man who earns this kind of honor doesn't sell it. He shouldn't have to." Victor stared at the medal, his hands shaking. "Steele, I can't. You don't understand what that cost you. $500. Steele laughed. "Victor, let me tell you what you don't understand." Steele turned to address his club, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Brothers, I want you to meet Victor Russo, Marine veteran, 3 tours in Afghanistan, Silver Star recipient, and as of right now, under the full protection of this club." A murmur ran through the bikers. Victor saw surprise on several faces, respect on others. "But that's not why we're here," Steele continued. "We're here because this man did something none of us have ever done. He risked everything for a stranger. No questions asked, no payment expected, no recognition demanded." Steele's voice grew emotional, something Victor had never heard from the commanding biker. "In Afghanistan, I lost my best friend. Canadian Forces, same unit, 2 tours together. His name was Daniel Morrison." Victor felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "Dan Morrison saved my life in Helmand, dragged me out of a burning vehicle after an IED attack, died 2 weeks later from injuries. He saved me." Steele's eyes locked with Victor's, and suddenly everything made sense. "When you told me about your Marines, Hayes and Morrison, same engagement, same attack. You saved my friend's life, Victor. Dan talked about you in his letters home, the American Marine who refused to leave anyone behind." The silence stretched across the lot like a held breath. "Dan Morrison was going to be my brother-in-law," Steele continued, his voice thick with emotion. "He was engaged to my sister, Sarah, the woman I was mumbling about when you found me." Victor's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the cracked asphalt, staring up at Steele in disbelief. "You're Dan's Steele?" "He used to talk about you, his American buddy, who was going to be his best man." "That's right." Steele knelt beside Victor, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Dan saved my life in Afghanistan. You saved Dan's life in Afghanistan. And now, 13 years later, you saved my life again." Steele's voice carried across the lot, addressing both Victor and his club. Brothers, according to our code, when someone saves the life of a member, the club owes them a debt. But this goes deeper than club law. This is personal. Steele stood, pulling Victor to his feet. Dan used to say there were angels on the battlefield, men who appeared when death seemed certain, who refused to let good people die. He said, "You were one of those angels, Victor." Steele's voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Yesterday, an angel saved my life. Today, we pay our debts." Steele gestured to the semicircle of bikers. "Every man here owes their president their loyalty. That means they owe you their loyalty. You saved me. You saved Dan. You've been saving people your whole life." Steele placed his hands on Victor's shoulders. "Brother, your saving days are just beginning, but from now on, you won't be doing it alone." The rumble of 50 motorcycles filled the air as the engines roared back to life. "We're going to build you a home, Victor. A real home. And then we're going to change this whole damn neighborhood." Victor looked around at 50 of the most dangerous men in Chicago, all waiting for their president's orders. What he didn't know was that in the next hour, his entire world was about to be transformed. Steele's phone rang, cutting through the rumble of 50 idling motorcycles. "Yeah," Steele answered, never taking his eyes off Victor. "Good. Bring them all." He hung up and smiled, the first genuine smile Victor had seen from him. "Doc's coming. Medical team, you're getting looked at properly. No arguments." "Steele, I can't afford." "Brother, you're never paying for anything again. Not while I'm breathing." 20 minutes later, 3 vehicles arrived, a paramedic unit followed by 2 pickup trucks loaded with construction equipment. Men in work clothes climbed out, but Victor noticed something peculiar. They all wore Outlaws patches beneath their coveralls. "Meet the legitimate side of our operation," Steele explained. "Sullivan Construction, we build things, legal things, profitable things." A tall man with graying temples approached, medical bag in hand. "I'm Dr. Nguyen. Steele says you've been sick." "I'm fine," Victor protested, but his protest was cut short by a coughing fit that brought up blood. "Yeah, you're fine," Dr. Nguyen said dryly. "Let's get you checked out." While the doctor examined Victor, Steele addressed his club with military precision. "Rock, get the demolition crew. This shelter comes down in 1 hour." "Steele, wait," Victor interrupted, struggling to stand despite Dr. Nguyen's protests. "That's my home." "Was your home?" Steele corrected. "Now you're getting an upgrade." A biker with architect stitched on his jacket approached with blueprints. "Boss, I've drawn up plans for an 800 SQFT cabin, insulated, air-conditioned, full bathroom, kitchen. Can have it framed by tomorrow if we work through the night." Victor stared at the blueprints. The proposed structure was bigger than any apartment he'd ever lived in. "I can't accept this," Victor said quietly. "It's too much." Steele's expression hardened. "Dan Morrison died saving my life. You saved Dan's life. By the mathematics of brotherhood, I owe you 2 lifetimes of debt." Dr. Nguyen finished his examination, his face grim. "Pneumonia, advanced. You need immediate IV antibiotics or this infection will kill you within days." "Victor is going to the hospital," Steele announced to his club. "No hospitals," Victor said firmly. "Can't afford them, and I don't trust them." Steele and Dr. Nguyen exchanged looks. "Fine," Steele said. "Doc, can you treat him here?" "I'd need equipment, IV supplies, a cool environment." "You'll have whatever you need, boys." Within minutes, a medical tent was erected beside Victor's shelter. Portable generators powered IV equipment and monitors. Dr. Nguyen worked with the efficiency of a field surgeon, starting Victor on antibiotics and fluids. As Victor received treatment, Steele sat beside him. "While Doc patches you up, let me tell you about your new job." "I didn't agree to any job. Sullivan Construction needs a foreman. Someone who understands logistics, can manage crews, knows quality work when he sees it. Steele pulled out a contract. $60,000 a year to start, health insurance, dental, retirement plan, company truck. Victor's vision blurred from the medication or the shock. He couldn't tell. Steele, I haven't worked construction in... You built forward operating bases under enemy fire. You can handle a construction crew in Chicago. Rock approached the medical tent. Boss, we found the perfect spot for the new house. That corner lot, elevated, good drainage. What corner lot? Victor asked weakly. The one I just bought? Steele replied casually. 3 lots, actually. Figured you might want some privacy. Victor tried to sit up, but Dr. Nguyen gently pushed him back down. You bought land for me? Victor, you don't understand how this works, Steele explained patiently. You saved the president of the Chicago Outlaws. That makes you family. The family gets taken care of. Steele's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and grinned. Even better news. Remember Dan Morrison's sister, Sarah? The one he was engaged to? Victor nodded weakly. She runs a nonprofit, Veteran Housing Assistance. Been trying to get funding for years to help homeless vets. I just made a call. Steele showed Victor his phone screen. A bank transfer confirmation. $2 million, enough to house 100 veterans. She's naming it the Victor Russo Foundation. Victor stared at the numbers, unable to process what he was seeing. That's impossible. Brother, I make more money in a month than most people see in a decade. Legal money from construction, security, logistics. The club's evolved beyond what people think we are. Dr. Nguyen checked Victor's IV. Vitals are stabilizing. Antibiotics are working. Steele stood as his architect returned with revised blueprints. Victor, look at this. The new plans showed not just a house, but a compound, a main residence, a workshop, a garage, and most importantly, a small office building. That's headquarters for your new Veteran Assistance Program, Steele explained. You'll coordinate with Sarah's nonprofit, but this will be your base of operations, your mission. Victor's voice came out as a whisper. Why are you doing this? Steele's expression grew solemn. Because 13 years ago, a Marine named Victor Russo risked his life to save my best friend. Because 2 days ago, that same Marine sold his most precious possession to save my life. Because some debts can only be paid forward. The sound of machinery filled the air as the demolition crew prepared to tear down Victor's old shelter. Your old life ends today, Victor. Your new life starts with a house, a job, and a mission. You'll never be homeless again. You'll never go hungry again. You'll never be invisible again. Steele gestured to the 50 bikers who had remained throughout the day, watching over the operation. These men will be your brothers, your backup, your family. When Victor Russo speaks, Chicago listens. Victor closed his eyes, feeling the antibiotics coursing through his veins, feeling strength returning to his body for the first time in months. When he opened his eyes, his ramshackle shelter was gone, and construction crews were already breaking ground on his new home. 6 weeks later, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Where Victor's ramshackle shelter once stood, a beautiful log cabin now overlooked the Chicago skyline. Air conditioning hummed on the roof. A wraparound porch faced the sunrise. The American and Canadian flags flew side by side on a flagpole that Rock had insisted on installing. But the real miracle wasn't the house. Victor stood in his new office wearing a Sullivan construction jacket, reviewing blueprints for the 7th veteran housing project they'd completed this month. His cough was gone. His cheeks had filled out from regular meals. His eyes held hope instead of desperation. The knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Sarah Morrison, now Sarah Sullivan, Steele's sister-in-law entered carrying a stack of newspapers and a laptop. "Victor, you need to see this." She spread the Chicago Tribune across his desk. The headline made his heart skip. "Homeless Veteran Saves Biker, Transforms Neighborhood." The article featured before and after photos. The before showed Victor's old lot, a wasteland of abandoned buildings and broken dreams. The after showed what the neighborhood had become: 7 new houses for veterans, a community center, a medical clinic staffed by Dr. Nguyen, a job training facility run by Sullivan Construction. "It gets better," Sarah said, opening her laptop. "Channel 7 wants to do a feature story. CNN called about a documentary in this." She pulled up a YouTube video titled, "The Man Who Sold His Medal to Save a Stranger." The view counter showed 2.3 million views. "People from across the country are sending donations," Sarah explained. "The Victor Russo Foundation has received over $5 million in the past month." Victor shook his head in amazement. $5 million? For what? For proving that kindness still matters, for showing that one person can change everything. The office door opened again. Steele entered, followed by Rock and 3 other club members. "Boss?" Rock announced. "We got another one." Steele placed a folder on Victor's desk. "Vietnam vet living under the Dan Ryan Expressway. Been there 2 years. Victor opened the folder, studying the photograph of a gaunt man with haunted eyes. The same look Victor had seen in his own mirror 6 weeks ago. "What's his story?" "Robert Hayes, 2 silver stars. Sniper, lost his leg in 70. Lost his family to PTSD in 88. Lost his house to medical bills in 2019. Victor stood, grabbing his Sullivan Construction jacket. "Let's go get him." "Victor," Steele said with a smile, "you don't have to personally rescue every veteran in Chicago. Watch me." 2 hours later, Robert Hayes sat in Victor's kitchen, a hot meal in front of him, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You did this? All of this for me?" "Not just for you," Victor explained. "For all of us. Every veteran who got forgotten. Every soldier who came home to nothing." Through the window, they could see construction crews breaking ground on another house, the 8th veteran home in 6 weeks. "How many more?" Robert asked. "However many it takes," Victor replied. "Steele's committed to building 100 houses. Sarah's got funding for support services." "Dr. Nguyen is opening a PTSD treatment center." Steele entered the kitchen carrying a Sullivan Construction jacket in Robert's size. "You ever do construction work?" Robert built half of Chu Lai's airfield in 69. "You're hired. $60,000 a year, full benefits, company truck." Robert stared at the jacket like it was made of gold. I can't remember the last time someone offered me a job. Welcome to the family," Steele said simply. That evening, Victor stood on his porch, watching the sun set over his transformed neighborhood. Lights glowed in windows of houses that hadn't existed 2 months ago. Children played in yards where abandoned lots once festered. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Nguyen. "Robert's medical exam complete. Pneumonia, malnutrition, but treatable. He'll be fine." Another text from Sarah. "Foundation approved for federal matching funds. We can build 500 houses now." Another from Rock. "Found 3 more vets. Same story. Are you ready?" Victor smiled, looking at his Silver Star medal mounted in a place of honor above his fireplace. For 13 years, that medal had represented lost friends who didn't come home. A life that fell apart. Dreams that died in Afghan deserts. Now it represented something else. Hope. The sound of motorcycles announced Steele's arrival. 50 outlaws pulled into Victor's driveway for their weekly family dinner, a tradition that had started spontaneously and now brought together veterans, bikers, and neighborhood kids every Sunday. Ready to feed the army? Steele called out, carrying cases of beer. Victor laughed, the sound carrying across a neighborhood transformed by one moment of kindness in a heat wave. Let's do it, brother. Let's do it. 1 year later, another heat wave hit Chicago. But this time, Victor was ready. He stood in the cool lobby of the Victor Russo Veterans Center, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as sun baked the neighborhood. 50 houses now dotted the landscape, each one home to a veteran who had once been forgotten. The center hummed with activity. Veterans received job training in one wing. Dr. Nguyen ran counseling sessions in another. Sarah coordinated housing placements from her office upstairs. Victor's radio crackled. "Boss, we got one." He smiled at the familiar call. Rock's voice reporting another veteran found in the heat. "Where?" "Southside Underpass, same spot where we found Nguyen last month." Victor grabbed his Sullivan construction jacket, now with President embroidered beneath his name, and headed for the door. "I'll meet you there." The drive through the heat wave brought back memories of that day 13 months ago. The desperation, the fever, the impossible choice between survival and sacrifice. Now Victor rode in an air-conditioned truck, leading a convoy of vehicles, medical van, construction truck, housing coordinator. They'd turned veteran rescue into a science. Under the Southside Underpass, they found her. Lisa Chen, 32, Army medic, honorably discharged after losing her arm to an IED in Afghanistan. Living in a cardboard shelter, shivering in clothes that hadn't been dry in weeks. Victor knelt beside her the same way Steele had knelt beside him that morning, 13 months ago. "Hey there, soldier. I'm Victor. We're here to help." Lisa looked up with eyes. Victor recognized the hollow stare of someone who'd given up hope. "I don't need help," she whispered through cracked lips. "I said the same thing once," Victor replied gently. "Turns out I was wrong." 20 minutes later, Lisa sat in the Veterans Center wrapped in cool towels, holding a cold meal. Dr. Nguyen examined her heat-rashed skin, while Sarah explained the housing program. "You're telling me I can have my own place? Just like that?" "Just like that," Victor confirmed. "House number 51. I built it last week and have been waiting for the right person." Lisa stared at the key in her hand. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" Victor thought about Steele, about Dan Morrison, about a chain of kindness that stretched from Afghanistan to Chicago, from one desperate day to 100 transformed lives. Because 13 months ago, I was exactly where you are now, dying in a heat wave, forgotten by the world. Someone saved me, not because they had to, because they could. Victor gestured around the center at the dozens of veterans who now called this neighborhood home. "Lisa, you spent your service saving lives. Your healing days aren't over. They're just beginning." Through the window, Victor could see Steele's motorcycle pulling up despite the heat wave. The big Canadian never missed these moments, the moment when another forgotten warrior came home. "Welcome to the family, Lisa," Victor said, helping her to her feet. "Welcome home." Outside, the heat raged. Inside, another life began again. The circle of kindness unbroken. Victor's story proves something incredible. One moment of kindness can change the world. A homeless veteran sold his most precious possession to save a stranger in a heat wave. That stranger turned out to be one of the most powerful men in Chicago. What followed wasn't just a reward, it was a revolution. 51 veterans now have homes because Victor refused to let someone die in the sun. Hundreds more will find shelter because kindness creates ripples that never stop spreading. But here's the real question. What would you do if you found someone dying in a heat wave? Would you risk everything to save them? If you had the power to transform lives, would you use it? Victor Russo proved that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. That true wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give. Share this story if it moved you. Like if you believe in the power of kindness. Subscribe if you want to see more proof that good people still exist. Because they do. And maybe one of them is you.